Welcome to the Black Belt Husband Podcast. I'm your host, Quentin Hafner, licensed therapist, thought leading expert for men, and the creator of the Black Belt Husband system. This podcast exists for one reason: to train men to win in the one relationship that matters most, their marriage. If your relationship feels distant, if you're walking on eggshells, if nothing you've tried is working, you're not a failure, you just don't have the right blueprint. Inside this podcast, you'll learn the mindsets, tools, and frameworks to lead your home with strength, create peace in your marriage, and win back your wife's admiration and desire. Black Belt Husband is the step-by-step path to reclaim your power and transform your relationship. Let's get started. All right, everybody. Welcome to the podcast. I'm here with my good friend, Scott Empringham, and we have just an awesome conversation in store for you guys. We have a story of transformation and progress and rebuilding on so many fronts. And I wanted to interview Scott and talk a little bit about his journey of transformation and just have him share some wisdom with all of us on what he's been through over the last 10 years and where he's at today. And I know it's going to be super inspirational for anybody listening. So what's up, Scott?
Quentin, thanks for having me. I'm excited to chat with you. It's good seeing you as always.
Yeah, man. So glad that we're going to have this conversation. I've known you for, I don't know exactly, but let's just say, I think I've known you for about 8-9 years.
Yeah, somewhere in there.
Does that sound about right?
Yeah.
Do you want to just give the listeners an intro of like how we first met, our very first
conversation? I first saw you online. I Googled you at somewhere around 2 or 3 in the morning, desperate for answers. My marriage was coming apart. My life was coming apart. And I knew I needed to talk to somebody that I could connect with, somebody I could share with, somebody I could talk to about my marriage. But more than that, I was looking for somebody that I felt would understand the pressure that I felt was unique to me about as a business owner, as a decently successful business owner. And I just felt like everything was coming apart. So I was at the end of my rope, and middle of the night came crashing down. And I realized if I didn't reach out to somebody and get help, I was potentially to the point of no return. So middle of the night, I Googled you. And if you remember, I sent you a note and I said, and it was like a 45-minute time slot on your calendar. And I said, I'd like to have 2 or 3 of those. You said, let's start with 2 and we'll go from there. And there we went. And I think I walked into your office and I sat down for, I think, a 90-minute conversation. Excuse me, I just drank something. A 90-minute conversation. And I think I just poured it all out there and didn't know where to start. But that's how I first came across Quentin Hafner, middle of the night.
Yeah, and I've worked with, so many people, and, but it's interesting because I remember that first conversation, and I remember meeting you for the first time and really just sensing the kind of the desperation that you were in.
100%.
And it's been, it's been such a privilege for me because we've stayed connected over the last, 9 years. And I've been able to be kind of a witness to this just really remarkable just evolution in your personal life and your professional life, rebuilding yourself on several fronts. And that's kind of what we're sharing about today. So when I first met you, Scott, and jump in and just correct me if I'm wrong. You owned a digital marketing agency.
Yes.
And was your business struggling when I first met you, or was your business thriving?
I think I was killing it.
You were killing it.
I think we hit $10 million. Business was going through the roof. Mm-hmm. And on the business front, things were really good. We were picking up accounts, but there was deep cracks. I mean, my agency was winning awards. We were growing like gangbusters. We were picking up blue chip clients, the kind of clients I used to just dream about having. We had, and then some, Motley Crue and NASCAR. I was working with all my favorite folks I always wanted to work with, but there was deep cracks in my marriage. And was what was underneath it all. And for me, I also worked with my wife. So my wife worked for me. She ran HR for my company, and we were at an impasse, and that was having a ripple effect on everything. So I think I understood, at least fundamentally, that crack was now becoming a gaping problem. And even though on the outward side of things, everybody from a professional standpoint looked at the business and thought we were just doing great, I knew that this could have a significant impact on not only the business, but my life and everything else.
Yeah, so that's the timeline. So when I first, met you, you were doing really great. And then I don't know how far into kind of you and I kind of working together, but I remember things starting to kind of like fall apart a little bit.
Yeah.
And, as much as, you and I were talking about how to, solve some of these really big challenges in your personal life, you're, simultaneously you were trying to like, plug holes in your business.
Yeah.
And it seemed like it just progressively got worse and worse and worse as your personal life started to kind of fall apart. And so would you, maybe just something to share for the listeners too, would you connect that, do you kind of see it as like strong causation that as your marriage was falling apart, like it was really difficult for you to keep your eye on the ball in your business?
Oh, 100%. It's funny, in retrospect, it's 100% clear that most people would agree, when your family life is solid, everything else you could deal with things. It's like a shield. It's like a superpower. When things are good at home, you feel stronger, you feel healthier, you feel more alive, you feel more vital and able to deal with problems. For me, in rebuilding my business, and I guess we'll get there, is I realized that was a fundamental thing I needed to put back in place: a spiritual foundation, a relationship foundation. I needed those things in place, because I've seen it too many times. I belong to a group called Entrepreneur Organizations, where it's a 40,000 business owners from around the world. I've been in that organization for about 7-8 years. The number one cause of challenges, or the number one of the biggest challenges to people's businesses, when things aren't good at home, that has a direct impact on everything. And I thought, when I first met you, maybe I could separate the two. Maybe I could successfully isolate my problems here and deal with business over here. But it was all consuming. When my relationship with my wife came apart, it had a deep and profound impact on my business. I didn't show up for key meetings. I was harsh with people that I didn't need to be harsh with. I wasn't getting proper rest. I was up all night. I started drinking to solve and to deaden some of the pain and kind of get through it. I was using sleeping pills to go to sleep because I couldn't get to sleep. So take that in Monday morning of a weekend of just horrible stuff over the weekend, and now start a Monday off and really think that you can compartmentalize that. I thought I could. And I also was under the delusion that maybe people wouldn't notice. People noticed. People saw. And it was pretty obvious to everyone around me that there was problems. And that had a deep impact on my leadership team, on relationships with clients, with everything. It had a big impact.
Yeah, your story is such a good example of how you can't take it apart. You can't separate the personal from the professional. That it's just, we have to look at anybody's life or anyone's business holistically and say, is everything firing on all cylinders? I think about that personally too. Like if my wife and I get into an argument on a Wednesday night, on Thursday, I mean, I can try my best to try to block it out, but I'm thinking about it. It's in the back of my mind. And that could be something as small and simple as like having an argument. But what you were going through some really big things in your marriage. And I could only imagine how all consuming it was, that really just disabled you from being successful at work.
Yeah. I'm a big fan of a guy named Tim Grover, and he wrote a book called Relentless in Winning. And he talks about how Michael Jordan, when he lost his father, he still showed up on game day and just performed. He talks about Michael Jordan when he got really, really sick the night before a big game. He was throwing up and he had this huge fever, and perhaps he had food poisoning, and he came up and he showed up that day, and he was able to put that aside and perform brilliantly. Kobe Bryant, all these different people. And I've thought about that, and I think it's different for a game. If I need to, I can show up on Monday and be sharp despite a bad weekend, but I can't do it on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Monday, Tuesday, and drag all that stuff with me and think that I'm going to be able to separate those two things over a longer period of time. It just isn't going to happen. I can show up on game day one day, but every day as a business person is game day. day in and day out.
That's right. Interacting with your employees and clients and prospective clients, and to try to hold it all together while everything's kind of a tornado outside of work. That's going to be really difficult. And
Yeah.
so maybe just, we fast forward a little bit. You're trying to plug holes in your business. Things are not getting better at home. What
Yeah.
happens?
Yes. Yes. Sorry. I can't. So I've got my son. I'm going to call you, buddy.
Cool.
Yeah. It's in the bathroom. Sorry.
We're keeping that in, by the way. So good.
What was the question?
So I just was, take the listeners, kind of fast forward. So, you're trying to plug holes in the business. The business is starting to kind of spin out a little bit. Things at home aren't getting better. What happens?
Oh, well, things that, it's almost like battling a monster, and the monster has 4 hands and you've got 2. And I was just getting the shit beat out of me. Unfortunately, my relationship with my wife was deteriorating. So that demanded time and energy and focus. And then things started to unravel with the business. I lost two of my largest clients, lost their business, which meant now my business was in trouble. So now I'm taking on line of credit debt, trying to patch holes in that. My relationship with my wife is falling apart. So she needs more attention, and that relationship needs more attention. The business needs more attention. And there's less and less time for me to get any sleep, to eat properly. I'll never forget, there was one time I was shooting a video and I walked in and I shot a video and I thought I actually was doing okay. And it's still on, it's still online right now. And the bag's under my eyes and I look like I'm puffy, I'm bloated, I look exhausted, but I had to shoot this video for my business at the time. And it's still online. And people have said that to me, said, what the hell happened to you here? And the reality was I was just getting squeezed. The demands of my relationship with my wife were there, the demands of the business. And ultimately, I made the decision to let go of the relationship with my wife. I said, I can only try to save one of these things. So it was killing me to think that I had to really let go of that relationship, but it was toxic. It was tearing us apart. The kids were suffering. I mean, my son, who just walked in here, my son was, I remember he would be in crying because my wife would be in her closet crying, and he would be knocking on the door, and I would see that and I would hear that. And as I was leaving a couple of times, I could see the kids crying. And so that tore me apart. I mean, it just absolutely ripped me apart. And then to go try and show up on a Monday or on a conference call to talk about whatever I was talking about and being fully present was just impossible. And so as that started to happen, both walls started caving in on me. And I remember making the distinct decision. It was the toughest decision in my life, was to say, I'm going to walk away from my marriage. I'm going to end my marriage and try to salvage what I could about being a good father to my kids. And then the worst thing happened, which is not only did I let go of the relationship with my wife and end that, but then the business ended up failing. And after that happened, I'll never forget the sense of my life just feeling shattered. I like, my identity as a man is father, husband, business owner. And now it seemed all 3 were gone. I mean, then it was a dramatic thing, because I didn't really realize who I was. I was a failure in my marriage. My business previously had been really successful, and now that had failed. And worse, I think you remember this, is I had the line of credit out. So then the bank called me after everything had failed, after it all came apart, it all came crashing down. I'm at home. I just let go of all the assets. I've got nothing left. I'm broke. I went from hero to literally zero, $500,000 line of credit. The bank called and they said, we need our money and you have 90 days to start making payments. And that day was the day that I remember thinking about a permanent solution to a temporary problem. That was probably at my worst. I was already kind of in the downward slide, but that's when I think I really was grateful to have somebody like you to talk to. And I remember coming into your office and talking to you and saying, how do I get coached out of this situation? How do I navigate a seemingly unnavigable situation? It was dark and the road was very steep uphill, and I was at the bottom of the hill and I didn't know how I was going to get out. And I was sort of looking for maybe like I said, a permanent solution to a temporary problem. For a period of time, it was really dark.
Yeah. Sometimes it's just hard to even conceptualize a light at the end of the tunnel. It's so dark.
There was no light. I mean, there was, but it must have been a pinprick, because it didn't feel like there was any light. I mean, I was literally looking around trying to figure out, how do I get out of this? And I couldn't. There was no obvious path. There was no path anymore. I couldn't see a path. How to get back.
Okay, so before we start talking about the rebuilding process, I want to think about all the people that might be listening to this that could really relate to your relationship journey, the divorce, the business falling apart, all that stuff. And if there's a guy listening to this that can relate to that, what would you say to that person back then?
Well, I'll get super specific. I can say, this just popped into my head. I'd never heard the words or the phrase. I think you recommended a book, and it was the first time I ever heard the phrase, an emotion. What is it called? An emotional affair. An emotional affair. And I've talked to my kids about this since. And what happened for me, I think, is actually very common with men. They maybe don't get the respect that they feel like they deserve at home, whether they're deserving of it or not, but they maybe don't feel like they've got the respect they deserve at home, or maybe they just don't feel important. Maybe they feel like their wife treats their kids and the dog and her parents and her friends better than they're treating him. I know I've felt like that. When a man, I'll be more specific, when I felt like I wasn't as important as everything else in her life, when I felt like I wasn't getting any respect that I felt like I deserved, it made me very vulnerable. It's all on me, but I was very vulnerable to anybody that made me feel important. And so for me, I got a sense of importance, not only from the business, because they needed me and they appreciated me and they seemed to respect me. But then there's also relationships where in the beginning, it was just a friendship with a woman, but it was an emotional bond that I made with a woman that was inappropriate. And I never would have thought that before. I thought cheating was a physical thing, and an emotional affair was a concept I was unfamiliar with. So I think something that actually is important for some men to hear is, when they aren't feeling appreciated, when they aren't feeling respected, when they aren't feeling important, that's a huge red flag, where I see it a lot with other men, where they'll develop a relationship just as friends with another woman who makes them feel appreciated, who makes them feel important. And that begins the trap that is inescapable at a certain point. It's very tempting. But I remember in the Bible, and I think it's Proverbs, it talks about sweet as honey. Her voice is as sweet as honey. And there's something in there. I remember reading that and thinking, holy shit. I mean, it's 2,500 years ago, or whatever it was, longer. And I thought, man, I fell prey to, Scott, you are a good person. And it was all good intentions, but it was as sweet as honey. It felt so good to be appreciated. It felt so good to be admired. And you did two things that I think were really important during those times. One, at times you held up a mirror and just asked me reflective questions about it, and I could sort of reflect back. And then a couple of times, I actually just asked you for advice, and I didn't know what to do. And I think you sensed that I was at an impasse. But during that time, I remember that was a big learning for me. And I didn't see that until, of course, it was too late, until I was, of course, trapped. Like any addiction or anything that takes over slowly, it's really small in the beginning. It's maybe a conversation, maybe it's a text, maybe it's a phone call, maybe it's something innocent. But that one thing for me ended up to be moving in a direction where I had a relationship with somebody that was emotional, but it was a relationship that drove a wedge between me and my wife at the time. And I felt like she at least appreciates me.
And what would you say to the guy who is developing that emotional relationship right now?
You're fucked. You're fucked. You're fucked. Because if he's already developed the relationship, by the time he figures it out, he's fucked. It's like an addiction, and he's going to need to do a couple of things. I remember Jordan Peterson talks about having a conversation with yourself. And if you really want to change your life, one of the things he suggests, I remember seeing this. He says, sit on the edge of your bed and ask yourself a tough question. What remarkably stupid thing am I doing right now to wreck my life or to really cause problems in my life? And it requires an enormous amount of self-awareness and then understanding what you're up against. I remember a long time ago, my dad struggled with alcoholism. And I was a cigarette smoker way back in the day. And I remember being in a Nicotine Anonymous meeting. And they said, you will not be able to get free from smoking. And same thing what my dad used to say about alcohol, until you figure out how big this beast is. If that guy for a second thinks, it's a couple of texts, it's a friend. If they minimalize that or trivialize that or in any way diminish how radically consequential that relationship is, they're fucked. They're fucked. And I know that to be 100% true because I was that guy. And I didn't know until it was too late, until finally that connection was made. And that was a strong connection, not physical, but it was a strong enough connection because I felt understood. And I don't know what you know about humans, but I do know from personally feeling understood feels really freaking good. It feels really good, and appreciated feels really good. How do you walk away from that when you're feeling totally unappreciated, totally misunderstood in the rest of your life? Well, it's a big drug. It's a big drug, and it's a big deal.
I think when it's a deficit, it's analogous to, getting that drink of water, walking across the desert. Nobody's going to say no to that.
Yeah. Yes. And I remember you used that analogy. I remember you said that right when you said that.
You've heard all my good ones.
But that's solid. And I didn't. You said that, and I think I just wasn't in a place to understand how big that was. Like, I minimalized it, and I was like, maybe, but this person understands me, and it felt really good. It felt really good, and I also didn't understand how big a consequence that was, and also that it's a mirage. It's a mirage. It's an absolute
Anonymous.
mirage.
They'll talk about if somebody is considering relapsing, if you have a good sponsor, they'll tell the sponsee, they'll say, play the tape all the way forward.
Yeah.
And it's this idea of like, it's not just the drink that you're going to have. It's the one drink that you're going to have that's going to lead to the 10 drinks that you're going to have. That's going to lead to you getting in the car. That's going to lead to you crashing your car. That's going to lead to your wife leaving you. That's going to lead to your kids not wanting to talk to you. It's going to lead to you going to jail. Play the tape all the way forward, because there's an innocence. It's kind of like what you're saying. There's an innocence in the singular act in the beginning of like, it's just a text message. But when we play the tape all the way forward, and your life is just such a miraculous example of the cascading effect of the problems that start to culminate and build on top of each other, that at some point you kind of bury yourself and it's very difficult to get out of.
Yeah. So true. I love what you said about the playing the tape forward too. I'm really good at looking at just that next thing and saying, that seems pretty innocent. And that seems like a great idea.
Yeah.
But
I think that's, there's a human nature kind of aspect to that I think it takes like, I don't know, maybe experience or wisdom to think, like, okay, I think this is, in a very lighthearted way, I think about that with just eating sugar, because I'm always trying to limit sugar. And I'm like, I just have this little piece of sugar. It's no big deal. But then like, as soon as you pop the champagne bottle, and then, next thing you know, there's more sugar coming. And then you got, so I think it's human nature to kind of minimize it and kind of see the innocence of it. And sometimes we need to go through hard things to learn these valuable lessons. I mean, I could have coached you at that time and said, okay, Scott, I think this is like what you need to do, or we need to go over here. But in some contexts, in certain aspects of life, we need to figure things out for ourselves.
Yeah.
And, some of your journey has been the learning lessons that you've learned for yourself, regardless of what anybody would say to you. Sometimes we just need to kind of go through it on our own. And so, Scott, so where we're at is, you're $500,000 in debt. Your business doesn't exist anymore. You're officially divorced. Where do you go from here? You're thinking about suicide. It's like the ultimate way to just like shut the lights off. You can't see any light at the end of the tunnel. Life, maybe At moments, it doesn't feel like it's worth living.
100%.
How do you decide to start clawing your way back?
Yeah. It was a little bit of a process, but for me, things clicked when I started to recognize that through a couple of conversations with you and with a good friend of mine that was also part of my business network. He got me to look at, and you got me to look at, the cost of not trying. What I was focusing on was the hill I had to climb. What I was focusing on is this impossible task of climbing Mount Everest out of a deep, dark hole that I couldn't even see Mount Everest. I mean, it was such a deep, dark hole. I couldn't imagine. I couldn't see any progress up. And what he and you got me, you were able to help me look at is the cost of not trying. And once I started looking at it a little bit differently, which was the cost of not trying, and the cost for me of not trying was my children, was who do I want to be for my kids? Let's say that I utterly failed, but I tried. What example would that be to my son and daughter? And in fact, interestingly enough, my dad faced setbacks when I was about in high school, and he ended up overcoming. He got sober. So what did that teach me about change at 50 when he was 50? And so I started looking at this as unbelievably as somewhat of an opportunity. If I was going to go down in flames, I was going to go down trying, because the worst thing in the world was actually, if I didn't try, what would my kids think to me? And that was ultimate humiliation. That was ultimate death, was if they saw their dad, this pathetic fucking guy who just checked out and gave up. That to me was the worst thing possible. And once I finally got my head around that, I started to imagine, what would it look like? And for me, I'll never forget waking up, and to me, starting to get my house in order was, I was drinking, like back to the Jordan Peterson. What are the things that you're doing? What are the remarkably stupid things you're doing? You got me to look at alcohol. And I wasn't an alcoholic, but I knew that that was destroying the upward progress. And so for me, that was one of the first things I started to really wrestle with and start to try to put to bed, to get rid of, just to get it out of my life. And I remember you challenged me one time, like, what would it look like if you gave it up for 30 days? Just 30 days. Because I think I'd been in your office enough times and talking to you, and you're saying, you're trying to coach me through this. Like, how was the weekend? I drank too much. I did this and this and this. So for me, it was actually removing some of the things that were causing problems. It wasn't actually taking some new action, but it was actually getting rid of the remarkably stupid things that I was doing to slow up my progress. The absence of alcohol eliminated some of the unforced errors in my life. And it was freaking hard, because the thing I wanted to do most would be to drink and deaden some of the pain and some of the worry and some of the frustration and some of the concern, because it's your old friend. It's your friend that can help you. So that was number one, is getting rid of some of those things. And the second thing was taking the smallest steps. I had the unique good fortune to interview this guy, and he was they call him the Iron Cowboy. And he did 50 Ironmans in 50 days across 50 states. I had the unique opportunity to interview this guy and say, what was the secret to success? This is before my business collapsed and everything. And he said, at times, 50 Ironmans in 50 days across 50 states, my body was so beaten up. My feet were so much like hamburger. And at one point, I think he'd broken his arm because he fell asleep on his bike and he just hit the pavement. So he's swimming with one arm. I said, what was the secret to keep going? Because at like 15 or 16, he was just dying. He goes, I would literally focus on just one step. I would block everything out of my mind and think about what's that one step I could take. So I literally ran whatever those miles are, one step at a time, focus on one step. And for me, that one step was, at the time, get up at 6 o'clock and exercise. I don't know what the fuck I'm going to do that day, but I am going to get out of bed and I'm going to exercise. I felt like crap. I felt like an idiot too, because what am I getting up so early? I've got nothing to do. I don't know what the hell I'm going to do, but I had to shut all of that out and exercise. When I got done exercising, I started planning my day. Still, all these negative thoughts going into my head saying, why? Because that's what we do. And that's the program we're on. I'd plan my day and I go, oh, you know what? I could call this guy. I could call this guy. And it's something. And I had to just fight off all that negativity was out there. And it's all in my head about why would you do this? But it was doing the things you know you needed to do, because that's what a man does. That's what a person does, who finally takes stock of himself and says, what am I going to do? You do it because it's the right thing. and you try to do the best you can to fight off the negative thoughts. And for me, it was a start, stop, start, stop. It wasn't a straight line at all, but it was that struggle every day, just trying again when I failed and trying again over and over and over and over again. And little by little bit get better.
Yeah. And I have a picture in my mind of like your offices before all the collapse.
Yeah.
You had these beautiful offices. I forget where your office was. There's, great
Yeah,
offices,
Newport.
And like
Newport.
all these, employees and then everything collapsed.
Yeah.
And you said, I'm rebuilding my business.
Yep.
And it's me in this tiny little space. And I don't know where you were in your dad's office or you were in.
Yeah. My dad let me squat at his office and he said, come on in. I'll give you a chair. So you're right. I had this big, beautiful office, Newport Beach, 40 employees, state-of-the-art office. It's a digital marketing office. So it's kind of like our little version of Silicon Valley, drawing on all the walls with his beautiful murals, everything. And it's on my social media channels. I go into his office and I'm sitting. He gives me a chair, a wooden chair between two filing cabinets that are literally like this. I've got this picture. I share it in my workshops now. I've got two filing cabinets. He's got his assistant there. He's at his desk. And the office is like a shoebox, but it's a cool freaking shoebox. And he's there to support me and encourage me. And I'll never forget one of the first days I sat down in this wooden chair and I've got literally my laptop on my lap. And he had to get something out of the filing cabinet. He goes, no, don't move, don't move. And I'm ducking as he's getting something out of the filing cabinet. I'm afraid it's going to fall on my head. And I was thinking, oh my God, life is really taking a turn. And in a way, it was super humbling. And I was with my dad, and his office rallied around and supported me. And it was like, it's like Rocky 3, back to the fundamentals, like back to the gym, back to the fundamentals. All that other horse shit is gone. What are you going to do as a human being to rebuild? And how bad do you want it? And what are you willing to go through to get what you want? And I was like, this is it. This is the movie set for me. This is like the ultimate thing. So I took a selfie of it. It's like, to heck with it. I'm just going to take a selfie of it and revel in it. One step at a time, I'll get out. And he said, he even lent me the first $10,000 for the business. He said, here's what we're going to do. I'm going to lend you $10,000. Most people say $10,000 is not enough to necessarily start a big business, but lent me $10,000. And it was everything to me. And that was like, everything.
What'd you spend the $10,000 on?
A laptop. One of the first things I did, because when I walked out of my office, I'll never forget, I was with my kids and I shut down the office. I hired an attorney to liquidate all of my stuff so I didn't have to go bankrupt. I didn't have to declare bankruptcy, but he liquidated everything. And on the last day I'm shutting the office down, my kids were tiny. And he said, I'm sorry to say you can't take anything with you. And I was taking my laptop out. He goes, does that have your customers on? I said, yeah, it's got everything. He goes, that's considered an asset of the business, so you can't take that with you. So I walked out with an iPhone and nothing else. And my kids, my daughter turned to me and said, can I take my toys and my crayons with me? I said, yeah, take your toys and your crayons. And there's a picture while she's walking out with her little Gelson's bag, a little grocery bag of toys and crayons, because they were tiny and they were in their pajamas. And that's what I walked out with. So I bought a laptop with what it was $500, $800. And that was it. That was what I started with.
So you started from scratch.
Yep.
It was you and yourself and your phone and your ability to make phone calls and to start over, to do it. I mean, you obviously have an incredible skill set. You're very talented. And so it was just about getting back on the phone with people, trying to get new client acquisition and stuff like that. And so slowly over time that started to grow. I remember one of the first things you told me was, I think you hit like a milestone where you were like 200 grand out of debt. And you were like, we were kind of celebrating that. Like, you're slowly paying off this line of credit.
Yeah. So there's two things I want to share. Is number one is I was very fortunate. I had a couple of friends who said, listen, if you can do for you what you do for your customers, that is your digital marketing expert, social media expert, you're all about generating leads. And that's what you do for your biggest clients. So do that for yourself. So I put a whole plan together for myself, a 90-day plan in which I was going to do that. In 88 days, I was so proud to walk in following a plan. I now teach at my workshops, all that stuff. And in 88 days, I walked in and I paid off the entire $500,000 line of credit. I took a picture of that and paid off the debt. I was still totally broke. And on one hand, I was still totally depressed because I thought I still have nothing because every dollar I was making, I was paying off the debt. But I paid off the debt. And that was proof enough to say that there was light at the end of the tunnel. That was a big milestone. That was like a huge monkey off my back. So financially, that was a big one. But the second thing was the most important thing. And I don't want to get preachy, but I will share my part of the story. Is I went out and I decided right around that time that I wanted to be baptized. That I realized that I started to build financially. I knew that there had to be a way. Once I had a little bit of progress, I knew that there was possible to rebuild the business just by outworking everybody. You could do something. But I realized that I needed to build a foundation so this didn't happen again, because I realized there was real fundamental cracks in my business. I'd given up on really trying to get my wife back or anything like that. I just realized I sort of saw it as a triangle: spiritual foundation, physical foundation, relationship foundation, and financial foundation. In fact, I think you kind of helped me organize my thoughts around what would that look like? What would success look like? And you were always really good about asking me, what is it you want? What is it? Where do you want to go? Start with a goal in mind and giving me that kind of focus. And that's kind of what came to mind. And I thought to myself, if I just build financially, relationship, and health, and I don't have some sort of spiritual foundation, then I'm going to go through. I want a North Star. I want a playbook. I want something that is going to give me a foundation. And so it hit me one night. I was praying and it hit me. And I called up my buddy and I told him out of the blue, I want to be baptized. And he said, okay. Awesome. Well, what brought you to this? I said, it's just a realization. It's been in my heart for a long time. And I've never made the commitment. Part about a fear. Does that mean what does that mean? And what if I screw up again? All these different things were going through my head, but I was all in. I knew I would fail. I knew I would fall short, but it didn't matter. This is the direction I was heading. And I called him and I said, I want to be baptized. He said, all right, let's kind of take it step by step. And that was a foundation that I was dead set on building. That, more than anything else, had the biggest impact on everything, financially, spiritually, relationship, everything across the board. It colored everything. It colored all my decisions. And I fundamentally believe that was the biggest driver of any financial success or any relationship success. I'm now reunited with my wife. That would have never happened had I not taken those steps. Nothing short of a miracle, I believe.
You just gave away the teaser. We were waiting for the end for that, but okay. Scott, it's so cool, man. So you get connected with God.
Yeah.
You're building your business back. You're clawing your way out of debt. You went from living in this, beautiful house in Laguna to living in an apartment. You have one chair and a desk where you're getting work done. I know you dated people along the way, but there was something in you that always wanted to try to rekindle something with your wife. Can you talk about that?
Yeah. Well, I tried dating. I dated a ton, and it just I could never get to the point where it felt comfortable. I could never get to the point where it felt like it should. I never got to the point where it felt like when I was with my wife and it was really good. And as a result, I didn't get close to anybody. And I would have relationships kind of peter out. You're either green or growing or you're brown and dying. And so it'd get to a point, it'd be an impasse. And the woman would say to me, well, where are we going to go with this? And I'm like, I don't want to go any further. And if I didn't say that overtly, I'd just sabotage it one way or the other. I'd start to pull away. I wouldn't return phone calls. I wouldn't do anything. And I wasn't proud of that, but that's just how it would go. And I wasn't all in, and I didn't really understand why it was. And that was actually with my bishop at the time. And I said to him, I figured something out. And he said, what's that? He usually asked me, how's dating going? And I said, I'm still in love with my wife. At the time, she was engaged. And you could see he just said it had this empathetic look like, that's a tough one. He goes, well, have you told her this? I said, well, she's engaged.
How many years were you guys officially divorced or separated and divorced?
We separated like in 14 or 15, somewhere in there. I mean, I don't literally from 14 on, it's like a blur, man. I wish, I don't know, but I know in 19 we were officially divorced, but like in 14, 15, the cracks were there.
So like a good solid 8 or 9 years, you guys weren't together.
Correct.
This wasn't like, oh, it was 6 months down the road. We're talking about a big chunk of time, 9 years.
Big chunk of time.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Big chunk of time. And separated for sure in like 17 or 16, divorced in 19. And then 20.
The pastor at the church looks at you and he just kind of gives you this kind of empathetic nod, kind of like, good luck. Good luck, son.
Good luck with that. And it was just silence. He just says, well, okay. And what do you say? And so we kind of sat in silence, but there it was. I'm still in love with my wife. And so somehow saying that did a couple of things. It freed me up from this thing. It was, number one, it was like pointing out the obvious, that the only guy in the room maybe that didn't know was me. But it was sort of pointing it out, like, there it is. Now, what are we going to do with this? And it gave me actually hope that we could figure out how to deal with this. In my head, I was actually thinking, all right, now I can deal with this, and now maybe I could move through this and move beyond this. But at the same time, what had happened was my life had changed so dramatically. I'd gotten rid of alcohol. I was going to church regularly. I was incorporating biblical principles in my life, and I was really living differently. I was teaching my kids differently. They would come home and they would talk about Christ, and we would do Bible lessons at night, and we'd do Bible videos at night. And it was just a different mode of operating. And instead of this brute force that I had applied in my life before, things just started to go away. I didn't feel the need to drink. I didn't feel the need to do some of the things I was doing before. I didn't feel the need. And it wasn't like this big sort of commitment, like, I declare. I'd always done that in the past, like 30 days, I'm not going to do that anymore. And then 5 minutes later, I'd be picking up the phone, I'd be doing something. But this was something that just changes started to fundamentally happen. And then I realized that now I wanted to start putting my house in order. I realized the kids weren't getting the attention they needed. I needed to repair a relationship with my wife, if nothing else, to do a better foundation for the kids. So I called her, I said, let's meet once a week and let's talk about the kids. She said, great, I think that's a great idea. So that's what we did. It started off just lunch, and we talk about it. We take a walk, and we talk a little bit about the kids, a little bit about her and her fiance. And oh man, but then I sniffed that there was problems there, and didn't really go into anything, didn't have any false hope or any necessarily hope. But then we did that and went out to lunch and dinner a couple more times. And then one night I saw that her ring was gone, and I noticed that, obviously. And my kids pointed it out to me one time. I said, I noticed that. And she seemed perfectly okay with it. And one night we were at dinner talking about the kids, and she said, are we on a date? And I said, I think we're on a date. And not too long after that, I mean, it was just, I knew what I wanted. I knew that I was going to ask her, and it was as clear as day. For a while, I'd stopped any relationships with anybody else. At the time I was dating somebody a while back, and I said, we're done with that. And then I told the kids, I'm going to ask mom to marry me on Valentine's Day. How do you guys feel about it? And they were just over the moon happy. And I asked my son, Nicholas, to be my best man, and my daughter to be the ring girl for my wife. And we got married right at the house. Real simple thing. Pastor from the church was there, and just did it right at the house.
How long have you been married now?
Since I think like 3 months. I should know my new anniversary. I know my old anniversary, but I think like 3 months, 4 months. It's been great.
What about, I'm sure your wife was skeptical, or there was probably a little bit of like a period where she had to come to trust that you were kind of a different person. What was that like for her?
It was a 2-year process of me not saying anything, but just showing up differently on a consistent basis. I'll give you 2 dramatic examples. I'm not proud of this, but one night her and I got in an argument. I had a couple glasses of wine, and nothing horrible, but not me. I'm banging on her door, angry about something, and she's flipping out and she's scared. She should be. Some dude is on her door, ex-husband. That's that guy. Fast forward, and we're in an argument. Fast forward 2 years, no drinking, going to church, raising my kids with different principles and Christian principles, not as a fad, not as a thing that I was doing. She was super skeptical. She even said at one point, she's like, "Are you doing this? Like, why are you doing this? It's going to fade. This is like something you're just going to do." Week in, week out, I didn't miss. Week in, week out, we would have Bible lessons. We would have Bible study. And it was just, I showed up differently. And it took a good 1.5 years, 2 years of time doing this. And over a period of time, it was just different. And now she's bringing me an Egg McMuffin.
Tell her I said hi.
Thank you, sweetie. and then we got married. It took about 2 years. It took about 2 years of I think, and then she finally just saw that I was just showing up differently. And I think after a period of time, that was it.
All action, no words, just behavior.
No words.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Yeah.
And that was it. It wasn't about me trying to sell her on something, as I just showed up differently. And I think, and the kids would deliver whatever news was different, because they were delivering other news. Yeah, Dad was in a bad mood last night. Dad was this, Dad was that. And now it's, Dad was at church on Sunday. We all went to church. We had this great time, and we talked to this, and we talked about this. And did you know that Christ did this? And did you know that this applies here? And she's probably, her head was exploding, and she's Jewish, but she was wise enough, smart enough, and wonderful enough to recognize that even though we have different beliefs in terms of faith, she was wise enough to say, "This is wonderful." I mean, these principles, these teachings are amazing. And they noticed that she knows the change in me. She knows the change in the kids. She knows the change in everything. She knows that I was reinvesting and just having a better foundation. And I think it gave her the peace of mind to maybe open up a little bit to it. And once that happened, things just grew really natural. And I have to say, you said something, and I hope this doesn't come out wrong, but man, you actually shared with me one time a total game changer. You said something to me that said, and I'm going to probably screw this up, but I want to share this because this was really big. I said to you that I had an epiphany about relationships or something. And I shared whatever I was going to share. And you said something that was brilliant. You said, Hollywood is really great at having you believe that relationship of your dreams is going to be fireworks and that skipping and dancing in the rain and all those things are wonderful. And we hope for those sort of things. But you said to me something really interesting, which is the right relationship can oftentimes build almost and feel like it's boring. Like it's just sort of 1 + 1 = 2. And that really resonated with me. And I thought, I wonder if that's possibly true. And then simultaneously, it's playing out right in front of me that I'm meeting with my ex-wife to talk about the kids, and we're rebuilding, and it's all happening. And there wasn't fireworks. There wasn't that thing, but it was this wonderful rebuilding that one was on top of another, on top of another. And it was a 2-year period where all of a sudden it was obvious. It was self-evident, but it didn't usher in like the movies. And I thought that was just brilliant that you said that, because it was playing out in my real life, and it allowed me to the ability to recognize it when it was actually happening.
So cool, man. So impressive. Your story is so impressive. It's just remarkable. And then, so where are you at today with your business?
Business is fantastic. My agency's booming. I've created a second business. I've got 2 businesses now. One's called the AI Training Academy, where I fly all around the world. We're going to be going to Mexico in October, and I'm bringing my family, and we're going, and I'm teaching, I think there's like 100 entrepreneurs there in entrepreneur organization. And I'm teaching them how to use AI to do all of their marketing, from their marketing plans to their calendars to their content. I've had the ability, and this was really interesting, when I lost everything, I didn't have all that overhead and that infrastructure as employees. So when AI came in, I had the ability to actually go all in on AI and apply that with all of my marketing, with all the people that were students in my program, and do that. And so I created an entire AI academy to do that. And so I'm in Puerto Vallarta and at Punta de Mita, and teaching those folks.
So good, man. So good.
And I apologize about the background. I got in and out with.
I don't hear anything.
Kids.
No, you're totally good. You're totally good. You know, this is work from home life. And my kids are always running into my office. All right. So, just for the sake of time, we'll wind it down. Any last words of wisdom, Scott, that you want to share with anybody that's listening to this? Maybe, something's going on in their own life.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Don't go it alone. If you feel like you're at the end of your rope, if you feel like there's no hope, if you feel like you've had it all and you've lost it all, or you feel like you've never even had it all, but you feel like you're going to lose it all, and you feel like you're at the end of your rope, maybe you are, but maybe it's okay to let go of that rope and grab onto a different rope, which is if you get the coaching from somebody like Quentin, he can share with you the tools that could show you a new path, that maybe the rope that you've been hanging onto is the wrong rope. And it's okay to let go of that rope so that you can grab a different rope and maybe go a different path. I know what it's like to feel like at the end of my rope. I know what it's like to feel hanging on, thinking that if I lose the grip on that rope, that I'm going to fall into the abyss. And it certainly felt like that. But ironically, it was like the very thing I was hanging on to was the thing that was fucking killing me. And how do you explain that to somebody when you're just hanging on to that thing? And that's the very thing that's killing you, whether it's addiction or bad relationships or just a bad place, But for me, maybe it's okay to let go of that, or at least the very minimum, if that resonates with you, don't let go of that, but call somebody like Quentin and see if there's a different way, if there's a different set of tools for you. You gave me different tools. You gave me different books. You gave me different questions to ask. You gave me some guidance at a time when I really needed guidance. And you were different than the other coaches I talked about, would just offer reflective questions and drive me fucking nuts, that are like, you leave an office and you leave a coaching call with this tangled ball of mess and you don't know what to do with it. You had the wisdom to be able to ask those tough questions, but then also at times when you knew I needed it, say, I would consider this, or maybe you should consider this path. And you gave me some direction when I really, really needed it. So I would say if they're feeling alone, if they're feeling lost, or they're feeling at the end of the rope, there is somebody to help them. And there always is somebody to help them. Whether it's you or somebody else, there is help and there is other answers. I don't care how deep and dark it is. There's a light at the end of the tunnel. If you're willing to do the work too.
Awesome. So good. Scott, thank you so much for coming on. It's a pleasure. And thank you for sharing your story and being super vulnerable for so many people to hear it. I know it's going to bless a lot of people's lives.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Okay. Talk to you soon.
All right. Talk soon. Bye.
Thanks for tuning in to the Black Belt Husband podcast. If today's episode gave you a new insight or a challenge to raise your standard, do me a favor, subscribe, leave a review, and share it with another man who's ready to lead stronger at home. Your marriage doesn't change by accident. It changes because you show up leading different. Keep going, and I'll see you inside the next episode.